I'm recording myself right now, but...
Like, I was on a YouTube video, I you the exposed to the video because like, I was so confused, I was like, what the?
You know, just me recording myself, chatting, drinking tea.
Hello, hi, welcome back to the Sketchpad Pod. I'm Alicia, and today we're just having another little sit-down chat. I do have some ideas about what I want to talk about, but I haven't really scripted it, so we should just see how this goes. Grab a cup of tea. I am drinking chamomile. Also, can I just quickly show off my new nails? What have you been doing with your extra bit of freedom? Have you been to the pubs? Have you been to a cafe? I got my nails done. I also went charity shopping, which was great. So in my last sit down chat video, I was talking about the fact that I am doing a research plan that will go towards my dissertation. I'm in my second year doing fine art, and during that research I've been thinking a lot more about confession culture and confessional art. Maybe let's get up a quick definition. According to the Encyclopedia of Identity, confessional art is a form of contemporary art that focuses on an intentional revelation of the private self. Confessional art encourages an intimate analysis of the artist's subjects or spectators' confidential and often controversial experiences and emotions. Confessional art emerged in the late 20th century, especially in Great Britain, and is closely associated with autobiographical visual arts and literature. So, confessional art is a term that I only came across a couple of weeks back. It was suggested to me by a tutor. I very much thought of my artwork as using storytelling, using personal narratives, looking at autobiographical details and my own memories, but I had never come across this term, and it has been really interesting for me to read about and also think about how the use of confessional art or society's obsession with confessions has changed even over the last kind of 20-30 years. Confessional art started mainly in literature with the likes of Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, female poets kind of working around the 1950s and 60s, I want to say, and their work was quite shocking at the time because it did talk about taboo subjects like miscarriage or abortion or suicide and the issues of modern day women at the time. Then when we look at confessional art within kind of fine art practices, that came about more in the 1990s with specifically Louise Bourgeois and Tracy Emin. Louise Bourgeois, she made these amazing kind of soft sculptures that looked at the grotesque but also the body and the human figure. It was very raw and probably made some people feel quite uncomfortable at the time. An artist that does similar work today is Sarah Lucas with her tights sculptures, and so it was really kind of rooted in what female artists were doing at the time and more specifically the feminist movement. I had not really looked at much, and I've never really considered myself a feminist artist. I would get asked that and I would think that they were suggesting that I might place myself within the context of feminist art because I'm a woman, and they were making an assumption. But as I've started to understand feminism more over the last few years and understand the history of feminist art, I do really see the connections, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff to explore. But Tracy Emin, I have known about her work for a while. You're probably, have come across her work, and I remember at school people would be like, oh, like that's not art, just like put a bed in a gallery or made a tent with all of the people's names she slept with, and people use that in quite a derogatory way to talk about her. There are some amazing documentaries and interviews, and Tracy Emin as a person is really fascinating. I think the media wanted to spin a certain narrative about Tracy Emin, and in a way, Tracy Emin has both played into that, but also used it and changed it to talk about really important subjects. So they wanted to make her out as this kind of, you know, rebellious, promiscuous, self-pitying female artist, and that is just not what she is. She's rebellious, and she's not afraid to talk about a lot of the harsh experiences she's had in life, coming from a working class background, and now more recently going through really severe cancer treatment. So I read an article on Tracey Emin and confessional art, which I will link down below, and I have my little notebook. I don't know about you, but I find when I'm doing research it's easier to write quotes by hand and then transfer them. But it talks about how Emin's work is not just a confession, it's not just instinctual, but by the very nature of it being art, by being it made, whether that's, you know, painting, print, writing, installation, there is an element of craft to it. So it says, Emin's art is a construction through which confession can find expression, a mediated creation. Tracy does say that if I want a bit of therapy, I just go and get interviewed by someone, which I think is really interesting in her kind of role in the media, is that she allows them to kind of dissect her own biography, her own identity, and that obviously has value for the press and the media, but she says that in a way it does have value for her as well. Whilst reading this, that made me start thinking about the commodity of confession. It says in the introduction that we live in an era where the confessional has become an almost mandatory component of celebrity self-presentation, and that the artists are required to confess. Although this journal article doesn't specifically talk about social media, I think that is a major component, especially around the 2010s. It picked up until now, and there is this want or need for authenticity, for personal information, for rawness on the internet. And I wonder whether that is people trying to establish more of a deeper connection, where digital content and social media has sometimes been a barrier to that. But I also worry about how beneficial that is for the artists and also for our societal view of how much is expected of people, especially those who are in minority positions. Should we be looking at them for their confessions, for their counsel, rather than doing the work ourselves? But then again, I am reminded of Walter Benjamin's essay on the storyteller, and he talks about how the storyteller provides counsel and is an integral part of society. It's how we learn. I'm just going to read a couple of quotes. The storyteller takes what he tells from experience, his own or that reported by others, and he in turn makes it the experience of those who are listening to his tale. He goes on to say, the more completely it is integrated into his own experience, the greater will be his inclination to repeat it to someone else someday, sooner or later. So I think why that comes to mind is that the best stories are those which are of our own experience, or that we relate to, or that we feel some sort of resonance with. And that's perhaps why confessional stories are so popular. And You only have to think back to the sort of story time videos that were massively popular on YouTube as an example of how this has fed into contemporary culture. Also the rise of, I think, Instagram poetry and confessional freeform writing. To link it back to its roots within the feminist movement, one of the reasons why I think confessional art became so important was because of the perception of women in the media, in film and in art, and how the role of a female character was often to serve the purpose of the man or of the male gaze. In Laura Mulvey's Visual Pleasure in Narrative, she talks about the power to subject another person to the will sadistically or the gaze voyeuristically is turned both on the woman as the object of both. Power is backed up by a certainty of legal right and the established guilt of the woman. And I think that's a really interesting idea, that the power of these institutions held was through the guilt that they placed on the women when they spoke out or when they talked about these topics. And one of the things that Tracy Emin does so well is reclaiming her own narrative and not allowing herself to feel guilty for these things that society would normally condone as wrong or promiscuous or not proper. In an article about garish feminism and poetic confessionalism, it writes, "Fear, shame and ignorance contribute to women being complicit in their own silence. Art can purify our objection because it offers a cathartic opportunity, and that the time has come to be bolder, more courageous and more garish." So this article would say that we should use confessional art, confessional writing in many ways. It can be cathartic, it can be a political stance and a reclamation of our narrative and our identity. But it also does state that confession is costly. That can be not only in your perception from the wider public, the hate comments or the discrimination you can get, especially if you are minority group, if you are a woman of colour or a trans woman or a non-binary person. Also the emotional toll or energy that it may take to confess these parts of yourself. And so I don't really have an answer to this, but I do wonder how this will develop in the future. Right now we are in a great age of being able to shed light on stories that have not been told before and provide safe spaces for people to open up who have not felt that they could. But also there is an element of pressure, specifically on artists, specifically on minority groups, to give all of themselves, which I don't think we should be asking. And when that comes to my work, I come from quite a privileged background. And so I also ask myself, is my story one that needs to be told? Why do I feel the need to put myself out there on the internet and give my opinions? But I also think that there is perhaps an element of fear and self-doubt that makes me think that. So I'm trying to only share things that I've chosen to share, things that I feel are important or that might relate or be cathartic for someone else hearing it. And I think I also want to spend more time looking at the relation of confession and mental health. But yeah, I hope that has brought up some interesting thoughts for you. I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this rambling video. I will chat to you again soon. Have a nice week. Toodles. Bye.